Yeah. Okay. Right.
Okay.
Sorry about the delayed start. Chuck is where are you, Chuck? Device, and has a power failure. So Chuck's on the phone. So I'll you'll have to tell me when to move on to the next slide. Okay. Chuck, over to
I
you.
will do that. Okay, so we'll start on the presentation. So first I want to start with a caveat this time. So the Corvallis, Oregon site, at one point, well, just before the merger, HP's merger with Compaq, was the largest site in Hewlett-Packard in the world. And it had, at its peak, it had several different business unit divisions, okay? The Corvallis division that started out doing calculators divided up, and there was became a components operations, which had the fab, and the personal computing division. And the personal computing division is the calculator division. It still did calculators for a while. Then it did the portables, the Portable Plus. It did the Omnibooks series, the 300, the 425, the 600, the 800. It also started and eventually became, a part of it became what was called the Corvallis Workstation operation. Corvallis Workstation operation did the integral, did the unicorn work. It also contributed to some of the HPUX software development in HP. I was not in the Corvallis Workstation operation, so I was not directly involved with either the integral or the unicorn. I was in the first the Corvallis division, and then the Corvallis components operations, which became the Northwest Integrated Circuit division. So I was not directly involved in the projects I'm going to talk to you about. That said, I had friends that were working in the project, and I was a big fanboy of the system and got access to the integrals I have are both prototypes as well as the unicorn. So with that caveat up front, purpose of this presentation is to document the product that would have been the HP 9808, share some of its history, its value proposition, and its application context, share its design specification and its prototype photos, with the intent to preserve its history with this group that might be interested in that. Okay, second page should say HP Technical Workstation Landscape.
Yep, we're on.
Okay, let's start with some context. At the time, HP had, I forgot. The PCD also did the HP85, Corvallis division. Okay. At the time, HP had the transportable HP85, and it had an integrated display, an integrated printer, an integrated tape drive, keyboard. The software was in ROM, so it booted up quick. And the software had applications, and you could have application ROMs and BASIC. And then the elsewhere in HP had the HP 9836 desktop workstation. Now, while the 85 was heavy, it was luggable. The 9836 was more or less immovable. It also had an integrated display, had integrated disk drive, keyboard, and software on its hard drive with applications in Unix. Okay, next slide. So where the integral PC fit. The integral was a nice fit in the middle of the two. It was intended as a follow-on to the HP85. It had an improved multi-window display. It had an improved built-in printer, an 8.5 by 11 fan-fold inkjet. It had improved storage, the floppy disk. It still had software and ROM, and at 25 pounds, it was still transportable versus the much heavier 9836, and it was half the price of the desktop. Next slide. Okay, so you should see integral PC use model. This is a picture from some of the sales brochures at the time, and it shows you, it's sort of like a next bench picture of how they envision that the integral would fit in. So you see it's next to instruments, and it's sitting on the desktop and they still have the 85 around. The bottom picture shows it's folded up and easy to transport. They literally have a product picture of it out in a field to show that it's transportable and you can use it in the field. And then there's a picture there of the back of that, and at least in the small version, there's a little square in the back, and we'll talk about that later. That's actually the ROM module for the System 5 Unix. Okay, so the question became, well, what if HP took this integral design and made a low-cost, entry-level HPUX desktop, something below the 9836, less expensive, but very capable for instrument control. Next page. So one of the key source documents for this presentation is the I/L Unicorn hardware design document. And these quotes are taken directly from that document. Unicorn's a low-cost, modular personal computer fully compatible with the integral. It runs the Unix operating system and Unix command applications. Unicorn 9808 is a system processor unit which, combined with a monitor and an HPCalc keyboard, becomes a modular personal computer for technical professionals. This includes support of our Series 80 customer base in the low-cost controller marketplace and as a low-end member of the Series 200 family. This is a very, very leveraged design, and that's why you can see that it was a fast-track project for HP. IDL did happen in February 1985, and its release would have been in September of '85. Now, sometimes fully compatible, we put it in quotes at the time because it should have been somewhat compatible or mostly compatible. But in this case, it was fully compatible. Next slide. IPC Unicorn Software Design Center. Is that up?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first, and for the people that were at HHC, I'm not sure if you caught on to it, but in this presentation, the titles of the slides, a lot of them are coded for either integral with the electroluminescent dot font or in the black on gray unicorn font from what it would look like on its display. So the Unicorn Software Design Center and the IPC were exactly the same. So it was the ROM-based environment. It used the exact same hardware ROMs for HPUX-RO. It had the friendly user interface, the multiple windows, menu, soft keys, supported the ITF mouse. The getting started tutor was the same, foreign language, localized. All the optional features, HP Technical Basic, the peripheral support, the applications, and the language, all of the software is exactly the same. So fully compatible means exactly the same software. Okay. Next slide. From a hardware perspective, again, it was very heavily leveraged. And the Unicorn system design started out as an integral design. It added 2 I/O slots, and it changed the video from driving the electroluminescent panel to a 640 by 400 black and white video output. It also added options for additional internal RAM, a second floppy, and an internal hard drive. Okay, next slide. So the Unicorn system block diagram looks a lot like the integrals with the noted exceptions. And on the chart, you can see the things that are different starred in blue: the Nighthawk hard drive and disk controller at the left of the diagram. Top right, the 4 I/O slots. At the bottom, the 128K of display RAM. Okay. Note that the Unicorn used the same graphics processing unit that Dean Heath designed for the integral. It worked just fine driving the video display. So with this background now, let's look at the prototype system. Next page. So opening the Unicorn. Top left, you see the what they call the system processing unit. It looks a lot like a modern day PC with 2 floppy drives up front. In the top right, you can see I'm sliding off the top cover. In the middle, you see a little U-shaped thing. That shows you what the top case is shaped like. So there was bins on the bottom such that you couldn't lift the top off. You had to slide it off. So I slide the cover off, and you see the picture of the opened unit. The picture on the left is got the back towards to the bottom, and you can see on the left side is the power supply box. The right side is the card cage for the I/O. You flip it around so the front's towards us. You can see the floppy disk, and you can see there's a sheet metal covering the insides of the box. Okay. Next page. So if we fold up that sheet metal panel, you can start to see the insides of the Unicorn. There's 2 major printed circuit boards. Along the bottom of the whole case is the main logic board. It goes under the hard drive on the left and the floppy on the right. The disk controller board, which is an optional part, it's actually for the B product, is secured to the fold-up panel. Then there's a little PC in the I/O card cage that you can't see, and they also say that there's a printed circuit in the ROM assembly, and we'll show a picture of that in a minute. Next page. Okay, so if I were actually logged on here, this is a bigger picture. I point out the fan, which is that thing in the middle you should be able to recognize, the floppy, the main PC board, the hard disk controller, the Nighthawk hard drive, which is secured to vertically to the left side of the unit. And that PC board, the main PC board is just one big PC board that actually extends under both the floppy in the front and the I/O card cage in the back, and that's what I try to show in the picture on the right. Next page. You got it up? Unicorn product specifications, CPU on the right?
Yep.
Okay. So right under the fan is, that I'd normally point to, is the 68,000. You can see the system logic towards the middle of the picture. And in the top right, you can see the socketed RAM. Okay. Wanted to get a bigger picture so that people can see it. Next page. Okay. The top picture on the left shows you the ROM port. And for those that have an integral, and remember the picture I showed of the back of the unit, that plastic is exactly the same tooling that's used on the integral. So when they say compatible, they mean you can actually take an integral ROM module and plug it into the PC board on the Unicorn. Okay. You can, and then there's a picture in the bottom right, a bigger picture of the socketed RAM, and we'll talk about why they didn't populate out the RAM a little bit later. Next page. So for reference, these are the Unicorn memory maps with the IPC differences highlighted. And you can see in the middle at the bottom, the extra RAM that's used in the extra internal RAM for the Unicorns called out. On the integral, that's just said that it was it's reserved. And then on the right hand side, there's at the bottom of the memory map, you see that there's ROM called out, and I believe that's the ROM that's actually used for the disk control. At the top part that's highlighted that's different, and it's actually, I believe, the same as the integral. It's just that they specify out in the Unicorn hardware documentation what the different address spaces are used for, and in the integral service manual, it only calls out that these are ROM. Next page. Okay. This is an enlarged picture of the disk controller board. Remember, this was mounted to that fold-up front panel. It connects with flexes to the main PC board and the Nighthawk drive. I mentioned in my HAC presentation that my Nighthawk drive is non-functional in the prototype unit I have. I've since been talking with someone that has two partially working Nighthawk drives, and he's also suggested some things I can try to get mine working. So haven't had a chance to work on that yet, but we may get that up and running. Even though the Nighthawk is non-functional, the integral works just fine. It basically works like the Unicorn's just fine. It works just like an integral. Okay. Next page. Okay, so filling out some more of the Unicorn product details. You can see a picture of the back with 4 card slots. You can see the HPIB and the HPHIL. And for those that aren't familiar with the HPHIL, it was HP step from HPIL to the world we live in today, where we have USB peripherals. So it was a loop that was more of a daisy chain. You didn't have to make it all the way back. So in the integral, the mouse and the keyboard both plug into the integral's 2 HPHIL slots in the front. The Unicorn is more HP standard HPHIL in that the mouse plugs into the keyboard, and in the bottom right hand you can see that there's 2 HPHIL plugs on the Unicorn keyboard. One plugs into the display, and the other is for the mouse to plug in. And the HPHIL, for those that are familiar with it, had a standard 1.2 cables. So Next page. So Unicorn product spec should have the display up on the screen.
Yep.
Okay. The display has two HPHIL connectors in the back. You can see that in the picture on the right. In from the Unicorn system and out to the keyboard. Okay. And you can see the video and sound inputs from the system. So why does a monitor have an HPHIL connection? Well, that's for a touch screen, which is that gray enclosure on the front of the monitor. So the Unicorn was a touch screen windowed computer. Okay, next page. So sort of like the old HP profit sharing announcements, when they did the profit sharing announcements, when the actual number was like one of the last things they said, so they tried to keep you in suspense. So here's finally, way into the presentation, the first picture of a Unicorn system. Okay, this is an assembled working Unicorn system. It looks like this. It's a stack of an HPIB ThinkJet printer on the top, of a touchscreen monitor on top of a system enclosure with an HPHIL keyboard in front and an HPHIL mouse out front. The stack, I've also stacked this with a 9133 or 9134 under the monitor and on top of the system, and adding a hard disk to the system, of course, expands its capability a lot over having to flip floppies. Next page. Okay, here's some screenshots. You don't see the lines, of course, with your eyes. Your eye integrates it. Even without the Nighthawk hard drive, the system boots up and runs like an integral with the extra RAM, and that's noted in one of the windows there. And the touch screen is a nice addition to the mouse control. So it just is a helper on the mouse. And you can see on the right-hand side that some of the utilities that the Unix utilities that are in the software engineering ROM module. Next page. So this is all a part of my little archive project. I've scanned in my copy of the Unicorn hardware design document, which was a key reference for the presentation, as well as all of the integral PC documentation I have in both 300 dots per inch, fully searchable PDF, and 600 dots per inch TIFF, one page per TIFF scans with no processing per Eric's recommendation for documents. So you can see the list of documents there. I think most of those have already been available. There's some that are new. Okay. Next page. Reflections on the integral PC and Unicorn. So as an afterword or summary, I found this note out on the web. Alan Barrow was responding to a post that the IPC was a failed product because it was overpriced. And he appropriately took exception to that, and he said, interesting comment on the expense. The IPC was priced comparable to the Mac, had double the memory, and a printer to boot. It wrapped a user-friendly windowing system around Unix in a portable fashion that did not require program recompiles, etc. It had a faster CPU and expandable memory. The list of advantages goes on. The Fat Mac, which matched the memory, was much more money. HP simply did not market the IPC well. There was internal competition with the Bobcat series workstations, Series 300. In fact, the IPC has dual serial ports in the hardware, but the driver was rewritten for only one to work on the IPC, as the IPC could not have a MUX to avoid competition with the 9000s. Also, the IPC motherboard was only half populated with memory, as are many of the add-on memory cards due to internal competition issues. The killer IPC that was killed before final release was the mythical Unicorn, which had a built-in hard drive and more memory. It was to have sold for $49.95, if I remember correctly, and he did. At one point, I knew of a couple people that had them, and there's a few out, and you see one here. The addition of the Stone Tools ROM, which effectively adds mainstream Unix command set to the existing kernel and basic commands, made the box a powerful package. The base OS was Unix kernel, basic Unix command, and a windowing system called PAM. It had a file manager, text editor, and would happily display character mode Unix programs as each window emulated a terminal, much like the X Windows developed much later, by the way, by some of the same folks. No networking was allowed, alas, although there was a way to work around that. The IPC would work with any of the HPCS80 drives and tapes, and the 9133H was a common accessory. The two I/O slots could be expanded to 6 with a chassis expander, which was required for the 5.5 megabyte fully loaded RAM. Mice, graphics tabs, and larger keyboards could be connected with the HPHIL. Full Unix command set was available via floppy and could be loaded on the hard drive in typical HPUX locations. Fix your path variable and you had a nice Unix system for its day. Remember that the kernel was in ROM, so no boot, so the boot was quick, and so was much of the command access. It could create RAM disk as needed as well, so you were not dependent on the floppies. Main intent and success of the IPC was as an instrument controller. It made a nice package and was a good replacement for the HP85. Business applications were never targeted. And so the Unicorn was the next logical step. It was a desktop version. Its main problem was that it was too darn good, and it was significantly less priced than the workstations, and had similar capabilities. So it didn't go out because it would have been too much of a competition for other HP products. So please let me know if there's any additional information that would be good for me to add to this collection for posterity. On a side note, I'm just beginning to sort through the HP IPC floppies I have. I've got all of the floppies from the Employee Computer Center for the IPC. And as I put in a plug, if anyone's interested in helping repair the integrals or Nighthawks or 9133, 9134s, please let me know. That's it.
Thanks, Chuck. That was great. Okay, has anybody got any questions?
I do.
Please go ahead.
Chuck, what is I/L? I/L?
Interface loop.
Well, the spec, not HPIL. You had the spec at the beginning. The spec was released I/L. I/L.
Oh, that I/L. Okay. Yeah. That's HP product lifecycle lingo. That's investigation to lab. So there's HP followed a pretty rigorous product lifecycle. I've been in 4 companies since, and I've actually leveraged the life cycle from company to company. And it was a phase review life cycle. So there were different phases of the life cycle. The first was an I phase, where it's investigation. So that said that the lab could go off and do an initial investigation, and the amount of investment was limited. Then there was an investigation to lab. Now, at that point, that was the kickoff for the project. That was the point at which the division was authorized by division management to go off and spend a fair amount of money. Again, determined at the budget was set at the IDL meeting. And so this is typically, the IDL is when the project kicked off and became a real project in the lab. Then there's LP for lab proto, PP for production proto. If there's a chip release involved, an integrated circuit release, there was it ran on its own life cycle, and it had a key checkpoint for it was the artwork release, where you went out and spent tens of thousands of dollars on masking and that kind of stuff.
I also have some specs for 71 documents that it references ICC release. Is that a similar phase or something?
I'd have to go look at. I don't have the context for what that is. It doesn't. It's not a familiar. It's one of the many checkpoints, but I don't know what it is.
Okay.
Now, by the way, when you said IL, the HPHIL is the HP human interface loop, which is the follow-on to the HPIL.
I didn't realize that. So HIL was derived from HPIL?
Yeah, it was the next generation.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was HP's basically attempt to take us to take peripherals, PC peripherals, into what we have today in USB land, where it's plug and play, and the peripherals would work across the product line. So all the peripherals that would plug into an Integral or a Unicorn would plug into the 9000 series, all the way up to the big iron.
I recall one of the things from HHC I said I would send you, but I couldn't remember what it was. But today it reminded me the information about the utility that lets you create images, both create and use images to create media that runs on current day Windows. I'll send you that information and a list of the diskettes that I have to combine, to make a larger set of what you have, so we can have one combined list of all the media that's available. That
would be good. Yeah, I think the first step for me is to work with you to get a catalog of what's out there and available. There's also in the groups.io, there's a person that's building a hard drive image, a LIF image for the Integral that's supposed to have all of the software in it, so that if you have a 9133 or an emulator, that you could put that on there and have a hard drive, a fully loaded development system for an Integral. And I have been digging into, since we've talked, the various HP disk emulators. There's one, as I think most of the folks on the call know about, the HP disk software emulator, which is, requires an old PC, an HPIB card, and whatnot. There's an HP85 disk, and there is another HP disk that Ander is doing, which right now it does emulate a 9133, 9134 with an SD card, but he's got a person that he's working with to test it out, and the integral is sending out some non-standard, as far as he knows, CS80 codes. So it's not, system's not working yet. That emulator's not working yet for hard drives. But I'm pretty interested in getting at some point a one of those little HP disk emulators, so that you can plug that into the integral and run off like it's got a hard drive.
That would be cool. I'll put me down for one of those as well. Daniel Doherty on YouTube asks a question. In 1985, where could one have bought the Unicorn at retail, assuming it had ever been launched? CompUSA, Sears, or was it purely a channel?
It's a channel. HP, you bought directly from HP and HP's distributors.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I'll try and see if I can see any other questions anywhere.
One other thing, a guy, I'm trying to think of his name, Mark Bielman, who also was at Corvallis and maybe on the product team, has made basic ROM plug-in boards. There's sort of a dot board that plugs into the back of the main ROM module that gives you basic in ROM, very much like the basic from 680.
Oh, excellent. Well, that was a standard HP product. So he's got a daughter board that he's selling now?
Yeah, he made several of them. I got one.
Okay.
He's
Thanks.
also
I'll check.
he also has threatened to make a modern version of the software engineering ROM, but that's obviously a much larger, I think it's 16 ROM sockets, and so it's a much more involved build than just, I think the 4, if I'm not mistaken, it's just 4 chips for the basic plug-in one. That one would have to go in the interface slot.
Yes. Now, Bob, I have been looking at the given some of the extra information it's in the service integral service manual and the Unicorn hardware description. We could build. I mean, the technology makes the integral system, look very. The new technology makes it look very simple with one flash chip and 2 RAM chips and decode logics. You could have a fully populated on a card. You could have a fully populated integral system.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, literally, you need 2 RAM chips because of the way the 68000 does addressing, but that would give you a fully loaded integral system, including, and you put the software engineering ROM on flash.
Wow, so you'd have all the software at the speed of ROM? That'd be great.
Yeah, and that's what you basically get. And yeah, so if Mark is thinking about doing that, I should reach out and check in, because I'm more of a software guy than a hardware guy. But if someone's used to building programmable logic, it's not that hard. I've got the logic diagram for the address decode already figured out.
I'll mention it to him. I think he's still in Corvallis too, so it's probably a local. You could hook up or whatever.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. No, this is cool.
Thanks, Chuck. I can't see any more questions on YouTube or on the chat. Chuck, do you want to do
on the other presentation? I request that we not do that, because I don't have a copy of that in front of me. I was not planning. It is still, actually it's starting to get light outside, but I don't have I had my speaker notes and presentation for the Unicorn, but I don't have the presentation hard copy for the 17C. Perhaps another time. It's a shorter, fun ditty type thing anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Or maybe if your power comes back on, maybe we could do it at the end, just for a bit of fun.